Hello and welcome to the Boom Podcast. Actually, folks, I don't know if I'm going to be naming it Boom. Quite frankly, I don't know why. Boom is becoming bigger than it really needs to be. Nevertheless, I created that monster myself. So this podcast might be changing name in the near future. For now, it's Boom. Anywho, without further ado, this is my first show of my solo podcast. For those of you who are fan of Simon and I, the missing 10% is not going anywhere. Simon's just busy making a lot of money. He doesn't have time for it. So when he's done making all the money he can get, he'll be back and we'll be back bantering with each other. For now, I kind of wanted to interview my people that I really appreciate their content or their anchor in life. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is this podcast or who is this podcast for? I'm glad you're wondering. This is for solo professionals or entrepreneurs who, as we all know, struggling at some area of their profession, either it's fulfillment, sales, marketing, accounting, pricing, or having the courage to do what you feel. So my goal is to get as many of those guests as I can and have you walk away with some strategy, some tips that you might be struggling with. Or maybe you're not struggling with, you just want to add another layer to it. I've said too much. That's the goal of the Boom Podcast. So right in front of me is a handsome man, glorious beard. His name is Tony. I will not pronounce his last name. I'll leave it to him because I've tried, my friend. Tony is the director of business development at MMG. He's the co-founder of the Rowdy Creator. Now, I found Tony probably, I would say 2 months ago, maybe a month ago, 2 months ago. He hopped on my comment section and I followed his stuff and I found his backstory incredibly fascinating, and I knew at some point I just needed to have a talk with him, and I thought, why not record it? So here we are. Tony, please introduce yourself. What have I missed? Most especially your last name. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get started.
Thanks, Doug. I don't know about handsome, but my beard is indeed glorious. My last name is Albrecht, and I'm grateful to be your first conversation as you foray into solo podcastum. My story is on. First of all, thank you for the kind words. I think my first message to you was one about how you're pretty much my favorite person on LinkedIn way back when,
Thank you.
That has not changed in the ensuing months. My story, the way I think about it is a term that my sister Christy and I came up with of off scripting, which refers to taking that conventional script for success that we've pretty much all been given through school and more school and getting the first job and the next job and the house and the car and all that stuff. It's like
Groundhog Day every day for everybody. Yeah. Off scripting. Right. I like that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what my sister and I both found some time ago, we started a blog by that name back in 2015 after the first time I torched my legal career. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that. But the basic idea is just if that conventional story for success doesn't fit you, then at some point, you probably need to go off script and try something different. And a lot of my life over the last 10 years has been pretty much that, just running different experiments in kind of going off that script while also still adhering to that script in certain respects. So yeah.
There's a balance, right?
For me, there definitely is. My story is most definitely not one of I had issues with my 9 to 5 and then I had this brilliant business idea, and now I make 7 figures. That is not my story. And for anybody looking for a linear,
Oh, the disappointment. No,
yeah, my story, there's a whole lot more gray area, but it's the way I think about it today is I think of my life as a creative life attempted, and it's been pretty good. Yeah.
So let me ask you something. You mentioned law. So as most Americans know, or think they know, the most lucrative careers, they've been told in elementary school, be a doctor, be a lawyer, or some variation of that. Why did you go into law school and eventually go on to practice law?
The Yeah, there are a few ways I could go with that one. Growing up in St. Louis, Missouri, I grew up in a family that really valued education, and in our house, education was the key to success. And I don't think that's a wrong view or a bad viewpoint. But in my house, the question wasn't so much like, what degree are you going to get? It's what advanced degree are you going to get? That was pretty much the attitude. And
were your parents both college educated?
My father he's an engineer who went on to get his MBA, and then my mother, she had a business degree and then went on to get her MBA and PhD. So while raising the 3 kids. So yeah, I have 2 younger sisters. So that was the story I was coming from. And to be honest with you, and I've written about this in public, including on LinkedIn a little bit, but I never should have gone to law school. And the reason I did, I think, was because I was hiding from the possibility of failing at trying other things. And another thing I write about rather openly is my struggles with alcohol. And I think by the time I even started law school, which was in 2006, I was having some problems with booze. And by the time I graduated in 2009, at the height of the Great Recession, I was a high functioning alcoholic by then. And my rock bottom moment was Thanksgiving night, 2009, when I regained consciousness in a jail cell on the island of Guam, a cool 10,000 miles from home. My first job out of law school in the height of the recession. Best offer I got was.
That sounds like an opening of a great book. I mean, I don't want to diminish your struggles, but that jail cell in Guam is very vivid in my mind. So please continue.
Yeah, I've had time to sand the edges of the narrative, Doug, over the last 10 years. And really that, the line I use a lot is you hit rock bottom the moment you stop digging. And at that time I came to the point where I was ready to stop digging. And my last drink was in May of 2010. And once
12 years ago.
Almost, yeah, coming up on 12 years. And it's, for me, ever since then has been an ongoing process of, okay, so I spent the first 27 years following that script that led me to places that weren't very healthy and weren't conducive to happiness. And since then, the next 12 years have really been about, all right, so what are we going to do about it?
This is great because there's a lot of similarities between our backgrounds. I think I could be wrong here, but a lot of us grew up in a time where our parents were playing the old script. The old script was very much what you said. Was go to school, get your degree, work hard, and you'll get promoted up the ranks. For I don't want to offend anyone here, but for boomers, that was exactly the script to follow. And I'm not, ridiculing anybody. That is exactly what you were able to do. Case in point, even if you didn't have a college degree, so my parents' didn't have college degree, but the market was so accessible that you could work at a factory and get paid living wages, and you could have a nice middle-class home, a nice middle-class car, and that was the script. So if you wanted to get out of the factory world and do better than middle class, go to school. And that's what people did in droves because it became more accessible. And then somewhere along the way, Gen X had got that script. And a lot of my Gen X friends were like, this doesn't feel right. I went to school. I can't get a job. Wow, my student loans are obscene. What the heck did I sign up for? And the flip side of that is the notion of happiness, right? Because when we listen to our grandparents and great-grandparents, at least I was blessed enough to hear that, they never talked about happiness. They talked about hard work, family, mow your lawn. It wasn't any more complicated than that. For some reason, Gen X and older millennials like myself, born in 1981, it's like, okay, well, I'm following the script. Dude, it sucks. I either have option A, I can continue that, or B, I can make something up and get myself out of it. So you hit your rock bottom. I didn't have a rock bottom other than my rock bottom was I had to go to food stamps. I grew up upper middle class. Here I am because I was a teacher and I got fired from my teaching job. And in between, I had a kid and a young wife. And we found ourselves at the food stamp office, Social Security office, and I've never been more ashamed in my life. Not shaming anyone who had to get that stuff to save your life. But for me, growing up upper middle class, with that kind of shadow in your ear about, oh my goodness. So there was shame that drove me to doing a lot of what I do today. Very fascinating. But you hit your rock bottom. You could have easily gotten clean, recovered, worked your process, but went back to law school with the fresh perspective. Something told me there was your rock bottom and you're climbing out. You realize this is not the life you want, right?
That is right. And I appreciate that story for just putting circling back to that. That idea of shame is something that I've spent a lot of time on because I did feel I've wrestled with shame about this thing we're talking about and with this idea of off scripting, really, because like you, and I'm 82, an elder millennial as well. My grandparents, my grandmother was in the Marines during World War II, and both my grandfathers were in Europe in World War II, and they both came of age during the Great Depression. And I also grew up hearing a lot of those stories and that mentality. And I'm not smart enough to understand how the world has changed, but that thing you're describing of just this, it seems like the story isn't working the way that maybe it did, or maybe we just have more exposure to other ideas or other approaches. I don't know, but so yeah, I try to stay mindful of the idea that the script in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's just that, frankly, I think I'm weird. I think I'm a weirdo, and I know it's come up between us that you're a weirdo as well, which explains probably why we're talking. And so I guess
my kids think I'm a weirdo, so therefore I am.
Absolutely. But to your question about where I came to is I started to put my head on straight and started to get sober, and AA was integral to my process of kind of regaining equilibrium and getting sober and starting to move in a positive direction, dig myself out of the hole I was in. I came back to St. Louis in 2010, my hometown, and to your point, so I had a good job in a firm downtown, but there was a moment in 2012 that I remember starkly, where I was talking to somebody about my office and I couldn't remember the color of the wall behind my computer. You know, this office that I'd had for 2 years. And that was one of those light bulb moments of this isn't going to work.
Keep walking through those 2 years.
Yeah,
That you've
right.
been following. We keep saying script, but this is almost like your life was on automation. So of course you didn't recognize the color of your wall, right?
Right, and that's precisely right. I really was living a story written for somebody else. And so 2013, I ended up doing the deal of saving the money. I moved back in with my parents for a little bit to save as much money as quickly as possible, and took a year off. And my idea was just to take a year, travel, and I had put in, I think, a fair amount of work to try to understand what I wanted my values to be as a man, and who I wanted to be as a man, and what I wanted to stand for. And that I was calling it a sabbatical. That idea was, what happens if you strip away a lot of the trappings of the script and just leave yourself time and energy to explore and to see what happens. And that year, it was a wild year, but it ended up turning into 4 years, which is just, yeah, it's goofy, but I ended up taking on contractor roles as an attorney in a couple different respects. One doing basically civil litigation, and the other working with a civil rights firm in St. Louis that does work with the unhoused and people in danger of homelessness. And those 4 years were transformational for me, where I saw a lot of things. I met a ton of people, including I met my wife during a 10-day silent meditation retreat in the Indian Himalaya, that's a hell of a story. But I met a beautiful Canadian, and I'm coming to you today from Huntsville, Ontario, Canada. And checked off. I don't know about checked off, but I had a lot of experiences that might be kind of bucket list sort of things over those 4 years before being ready to, start a family. And so, to kind of that point you brought up a few minutes ago, 2017, I ended up plugging back into the matrix and got a really good opportunity to go back to litigating in St. Louis after having.
I love that term, plugging back into the matrix. So you were, theoretically speaking, Neo, and you took the red pill, and a minute speaking, went up to the Himalayas, met your wife. You had a great 4 years. At some point, you had to plug yourself back in. This is a beautiful analogy, because it's not a straight shot. There's a lot of detours that happen along the way. And I think a lot of people have it in their head. You kind of said it when we talked privately. It wasn't like I went from here to here. And I don't think life works that way per se. Maybe it does for some. But go ahead. You plugged back into the matrix. What happened?
Well, the point at which I did that in the fall of 2017, things were not going well in my life, where I had been married for a year, but my wife and I, we didn't have not even just a house. We didn't have our own apartment. We didn't have a car. We were both in our 30s and wanted to have a family, but it wasn't clear how we were going to go from where we were to being in a point where we could really start a family and feed our family, right? So the plugging back in was to some degree out of necessity, right? But needing, so when I talk about it, my journey not being a linear one, it was a very practical decision of, I've had some sort of entrepreneurial ventures that have been fun. I've learned a ton. I made a little bit of money, but I haven't figured anything out in a way that's going to pay the bills for myself and my family. And I got a really good opportunity to work with somebody I really liked, a good friend of mine in St. Louis, and actually kind of plug back in really at the level I would have been at had I never left in the first place, which was always sort of a question in the back of my mind through those 4 years was, am I ever going to be able to actually get a job again if I need to? So like learning that lesson of, okay, yeah, no, you can. And then, our son was born in 2018. We then had we got ourselves a house in St. Louis in 2018, and our daughter came in 2021. And after 4 years of that deal being back in law, it was time for another leap in
And what did
2020.
they,
What's that?
what was the next leap that you took after all that time?
So I refer to 2021 as a year of just grabbing the armrests on this seat, just hoping the plane doesn't crash. That was like that. Our daughter Layla was born in February. We relocated from St. Louis to Ontario in May to a property we had never seen. I
mean, you looked online and you bought the property,
yeah,
and then you moved that.
Yeah, we had boots on the ground, and my wife's parents, who were our kind of agents here, who did a lot of the looking for us. I ended up leaving the law in October and starting a new role at an 80% schedule, which is another interesting sort of thing for me that calls back to what we were talking about earlier with like that idea of just work hard. The idea that I would take a 4-day-a-week full-time gig is a challenge in and of itself, but taking a role in nonprofit consulting while also dedicating more time and attention to the Rowdy Creative, our virtual community for creativity. So
now let's talk about that. At the end of that, we got to wrap this all up for our viewers who are struggling at various stages where you want to work, and I want to give them some opportunities to, maybe let go of the share, like the plane ride, acknowledge it, your hands are going to be really sore. So let's talk about the Rowdy Creator. What is it? What is the philosophy behind it, and why?
Sure. So, like I said, we're a virtual community, and the philosophy behind it is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield is a book that's had a tremendous influence on me. That book's thesis is that to create anything, you have to win the daily battle against a force he calls resistance. And resistance is basically that natural force that pushes back on you whenever you try to do something to improve yourself or improve the world, right? And my sister Christy and I, we both grew up writing, and we wanted to be writers. We had dreams of being novelists. And when we were both in a traveling phase back in like 2015, 2016, we would talk about our book ideas, but they weren't happening. What we ended up doing was starting a support group for creativity, where we were basically just say, like, we're going to do little cohorts, focus on a project for a month at a time and just see if we can't move these things forward. We called that project Axis, which was an acronym, artists creating, supporting, and shipping. And over the course of 5 years, we ran more than 24 cohorts, and we made a bunch of stuff. Right? We got a bunch of stuff made, and over time, we did find kind of our little community. We are a little tribe, sort of evolved.
Who typically signs up for this community? What kind of backgrounds?
We were across the board. I would say that by the time we got to the end of 2021, about half of our folks were people who wanted to be writing more. Okay. But in terms of like professional background, we're kind of across the board. And the Rowdy came into existence because we had this community. We'd had a lot of really powerful experiences together in terms of like showing up and doing our work. And the model, due to flaws in the creator's design, was unscalable and really lacking. So the Rowdy, we moved from what we had been doing, which was Slack and Zoom, to Mighty Networks, a virtual community platform that's pretty sweet. I've been really impressed with it. And in January of this year, just a couple months ago, we're recording this in early March, we relaunched as the Rowdy Creative, and we've kind of doubled in size over the course of these first 2 months. And we've got monthly cohorts, one that's based on creative sprinting, so taking a project and just pushing it forward. Another one that's focused on wellness practices, like this yin and yang of productivity and taking care of oneself, right? The like discipline combined with being gentle and kind to ourselves, trying to combine those things in a way that we can cultivate our creativity in a way that we're not going to get burned out.
This is really fascinating to me, and I'll tell you why. Because my journey, similar to yours, you had to go to school. So I went to the University of Denver, and I couldn't pick a major for the life of me. I was like, whatever. So I went pre-med. And so I'm taking these science courses, and I'm like, geez, this is really boring, man. Like, I don't want to know chemistry. I don't care for chemistry. Physics, please just shoot me now. I mean, so I'm like, okay, I told my advisor, okay, I've had enough. I don't want to do that. Then my advisor is like, well, you only have a year and a half left to graduate. Why are you switching your major now? Because I can't stand this anymore. And then I started picturing different majors I wanted to do. She's like, you're going to add another year to graduation date. And my father was like, you're graduating 4 years. I don't care what it is. 4 years, you're out. I'm like, okay, so I asked my advisor, what's the easiest major you have? And she's like, business. I'm like, put me that. So I get into business. I'm bored to tears, but I can pass the course really quickly. Like, I can do it with my eyes closed and get a B for the course. Then I get out. I graduate. The Great Recession hits. Like, right smack dab in the middle of it. Can't get a job to save my life. But I'm like, I heard about these student loan thing because my father paid. So I'm free from him now. I'm like, okay, what if I went back to school and just took out loan? And I went back to school to be a creative writer. And because I grew up reading books all the time. I love reading lots of different types of books. So I went into that, and the funny thing is, one thing I was pissed off about my generation was the generation before us had it good, not before, preceding us had it good. For example, Henry Miller had parents. You could go to parents and live with artists, get drunk, and then he could do. Ernest Hemingway had his creative group. The French philosophers, Albert Camus, Sartre had themselves, they had community. And when I went in 2003, there was no such thing. First of all, if there was a thing, it was so, you know, it was all about how you look, how you drive, what kind of cigarettes did you smoke. It's like, this is not real, you know? Where is my parents? Where is my Henry Miller parents? Where is my, you know, Africa for Ernest Hemingway or Cuba for that matter? And there was none. And it died. The creative spirit of America. I don't care. I will fight anybody to the death to prove to me that we are a creative generation. Will not name one best-selling author from my generation, except not you. We read. People who don't read. There is nobody. Not one. Please don't tell me it's David Adams. I met the dude. You know, he's not an artist. He's not. He's just, you know, he doesn't have the verb to be bold. He doesn't. I'm sorry. He's a sellout too. Anyway, moving on from David. My point is, I was pissed that there was no 10 year where you could smoke hats and, you know, Bukowski or I didn't have that. Now I'm hearing from you, Rowdy Creative. It's the 2022 version of that.
I hope. Oh, go ahead.
Without the weed and the hats and bottles of wine, it is an incubator for creativity. That's what I was missing. There was no incubator. There was no rally cry. My generation doesn't have a rally cry. My generation rally cry is, what's your TikTok handle, bro? You know, that's our rally cry. So I'm fascinated with Rowdy Creative. So what is the dream of this for you and your sister?
That is so well put. I think I may rip off most of that and just start spouting that off myself. Because when I think about it, you know, Hemingway's A Movable Feast about Paris in the 20s, that was in my mind with Axis but we were vagabonds. We were all over the place. And I described, you know, in COVID, everybody spent all this time on Zoom. We got good at Zoom way before COVID. Like, it was 2016 when we were figuring out not just how to talk on Zoom, but how to talk on Zoom in a way that felt nourishing and felt good, and where you could actually connect with people in a way that tingles, right? Like, we were doing that then. And by 2020, when everything shut down and we had taken kind of an 18-month hiatus where we'd only done one cohort of Axis, we got back into it and we were just rolling all the way through and just gaining momentum that is now carried over into the Rowdy in some really fantastic ways. But our vision for the thing is to have that sort of community and that sort of creative energy that is not confined by geography. And my intention, and Christy may have different ideas on this, and we talk about it, but I intend to take this thing to 1,000 members, and for us to actually serve not just as people to bounce ideas off of and people to kind of bask in the creative energies of. That's certainly part of it. That's a huge part of it, just to commiserate in the struggle to create. But we're creating a self-sustaining creative economy where we've got a visual artist, Jen Fitzwater, who's super talented. And last year, my wife and I commissioned 3 different pieces from her. Right? And my sister Christy, on her most recent book manuscript, she hired an editor within the community to edit that thing for her. Right? And these are the sorts of things where, and that was, all that stuff was when we were like 15 people. And where I'm trying to get to is what happens when we're at 100 and what happens when we're at 300 and 500 in terms of the opportunities to collaborate, to exchange,
to cross-pollinate,
yeah, exactly.
idea and skill sets. Yeah.
Yeah. So anybody who's listening who's turned on by that idea, you know where to find me.
Where can we find you? Seriously, what's the website? I'll put it in the description below.
So the rowdycreative.com is our website. That's how to get into the community. And we've got a free trial to get in and check it out and just find out whether we're a good fit. And we try to make it super easy to engage with us. And yeah, I view my role in the thing to what you were saying. When I was 21, I wanted to be Hemingway. Now that I'm pushing 40, I'm good to be Gertrude Stein if I can figure that out. Yeah.
One more question, and let's try to wrap this up to tangible things that the audience can take away from this. But what's your goal on LinkedIn? As far as I can tell, this is not a criticism. This is just me. What are you selling? Because it seems like everybody's selling something on LinkedIn, right? Like I've been going off on a rant with people lately about, but I don't sell anything. Yes, you do. I don't care if it's a product or service or lack thereof. You are selling me something, So, in all honesty, are you selling the Rowdy Creator? Are you selling MMG or your brand, your personal brand?
Well, I'll pull back the curtain for you since it's just between you and me. My writing about creativity on LinkedIn is a happy accident because when I was transitioning out of law to this new role, my buddy Josh, who I was going to work for this new place, said, part of your job is going to be to help us turn from being a referral-based business to bring in new people who've never engaged with Mission Matters Group before, right? So we need to learn. Yeah, we need to learn how to use LinkedIn. And for me, LinkedIn had been nothing more than a place to stash my digital resume, right? That's all it was for 10 years. So, all right, I'll learn. I was hoping to get effective. I did not expect to enjoy it. And I have so appreciated the quality of conversation and connection on that platform that even 6 months ago, I would not have believed if you had told me where I would be now, like how much I'd be producing, that I'm producing daily content, that I'm sharing things like the Guamanian jail cell story on LinkedIn. I would not have believed it. But once I started to understand the personal branding and starting to get into that, I've appreciated how you're talking about that idea over the last really few weeks. You've been really zeroing in on the, hey, part of this deal is showing proof. Part of this deal is showing your expertise, like what you know, and it is influencing me. And I think I'm going to start shifting how I talk in the coming month based on specifically on the things you're talking about.
Oh, thank you, Matt.
Yeah, because LinkedIn is going to be a primary growth engine for the Rowdy Creative. It already is. I mean, I think we've added 9 or 10 people in the last month. And that's without me posting anything that I guess would be considered like a direct sales ask. So
I love that. Yeah. Quick question. So in your time on LinkedIn, obviously you reached out to me in the DM that you're putting together some sort of course, training, whatever the case may be. But Mike, what is it that you feel that people need to work more on when they're hopping on LinkedIn, either to work on their personal brand or start out with business development, whatever the goal is? What do you think the platform is lacking? I could talk all that.
Yeah.
I want to give it to you.
So I had messaged you about this little, I'm calling it Get Linked in 30 Minutes. And the idea with this tiny little course is to help people go from what I had been, where I'd been ignoring the platform and had no idea what it was capable of, to starting to gain some traction with their content and with building a substantive network in a month. It really, the thing will start to open up very quickly, right? So that, and my understanding of how to do that at this point, the way I think about it is be interesting and be generous. So the being interesting part is around the personal branding. It's what is the corner you're standing on, right? The internet's a huge place. Pick your corner and own it, right? Do that deal. And you really are one of the best in the game at doing that. And then the being generous piece of it, right? I think too many people think when they're engaging on LinkedIn that the trick to the thing, you've got to sound professional, right? You've got to sound like the expert. And well, I mean, do you disagree with that?
No. I'm disagreeing with people's thought. I'm not disagreeing with your. Okay. I'm disagreeing with the narrative that you're
right on. Okay.
Bringing to the audience.
Yeah. So that attitude, which is what I had, what it has created is a platform that is so boring, right? It's 800 million people, and the vast majority of them feel that way, which leaves a tremendous amount of digital real estate that is up for grabs. And you do not have to be Hemingway or the most interesting man in the world to say something more interesting than a press release. So if you're able to be interesting and be generous in commenting on other people's stuff and offering your insights on other people's stuff, then as opposed to saying, I need to always be selling, or I need to in a direct way, right? Or like I need to be always be showing how smart I am or how much of an expert I am, but just being like, talk like a person, like talk about things that you care about, and we'll talk about all day long, regardless of whether anybody's paying you for it. And if you can do those things, you can really start to see so that the platform will open up for you in a way that would have seemed impossible.
Yeah, the platform is such a weird place because for those of you who don't really know my background, for years I was on Twitter and we hated LinkedIn. We would throw grenades at it. Like, it's for old farts, okay? For old, rotund white men to post their resume. Okay, no offense to anyone, but that's what I saw that in my mind. They had the tie tight and too tight with their cheeks spilling over the collar. That was my vision of LinkedIn. So I stayed away from it. And I was, trolling people on Twitter back and forth. There was a mutual exchange of affinity for each other. But I was getting burned out because the thing about Twitter today, as in before, it's primarily anonymous. There's a lot of anonymous accounts. You never really know who you're interacting with. Okay? Even though the tweet might be powerful, you really just don't know who you're talking to. That's why, too, because of that, it's a little bit more vicious. People are a little bit more too free with their words. And words hurt, right? And three, the competition there is that there's not a lot of prime real estate there because more people use Twitter than they do LinkedIn. And there's more creators on Twitter than LinkedIn, meaning anybody can tweet. It's so easy to send out a tweet. I find LinkedIn is the opposite. Very few people post content comparable. So there's not 800 million people posting content. 1% of that is doing that. And to your point, it's the wild, wild west, baby. Planting your flag in the ground. Say, this is my property. And set up your little prairie on the hill I mean, you can't do that on Twitter anymore. You have to
Yeah.
fight for that period on the hell. TikTok, I would argue, is similar. There's a lot of real estate, but it's confusing. And the community aspect of Twitter is non-existent. I mean, nobody really has a community on Twitter, right? I mean, on TikTok. But LinkedIn, my goodness, the transparency is radical because I can go on your profile. I can see the school you graduated from. I can look at your job. I can look at recommendations of you. It's basically a landing page. So it's really hard to hide on LinkedIn, which brings, for the most part, the best behavior on social media you're ever going to get. Because if you're going to behave badly, you know, either the platform is going to get you or people are just not going to buy your stuff.
And is that the reason that you think the quality of conversation is better on LinkedIn? Is it simply a matter of the transparency or the confidence you have in who somebody is?
But for some reason, for example, when we reach out to each other, it was just a conversation. People were more willing to have a conversation on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
Twitter, I never, it was really hard to have a conversation with people. There's a lot of distrust. Number one, it's not even your profile picture. You know, it's that if you have an avatar, by the way, I used to run an anonymous account. I still got clients, you know, because they can dox you so hard on Twitter. So I had to protect a lot of things. It's just a fight, but you can make money. But anyway, LinkedIn is just a more transparent place to be. Now, you could lie about your results, but you're going to get found out rather quickly if you're not truly backing up what you say. You should have testimonial backing you up because you can't hide that stuff. And if you don't, I'm like, so what you're saying, not connecting because I'm not seeing where you're going with it. So anyway, LinkedIn is the wild, wild west. There's a lot of haters saying it's over. It's Facebook now. No. Have you seen Facebook?
No, it is not Facebook.
No, there's no politics on here. There is, but Facebook is primarily political. I find a lot of propaganda. Either side, both sides, left, right, center. Who cares? There's a lot of propaganda on Facebook, and I don't get that on LinkedIn, which I think leads to more interesting conversations, right?
Amen to that.
Yeah. And so these guys are putting together, what is the first step people should take when they make a commitment to LinkedIn?
The first thing I think is that idea of, instead of thinking about it in terms of what am I going to start posting, or like what am I getting, start by asking, how can I be generous? The first thing is to go and start to find people who are interesting. And you can do that, you know, through hashtags. You can do that through basically like finding one person who's talking about something you care about, go into their comments section and start finding other people, right? And just start developing it that way.
Connecting the dots, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's counterintuitive, and it's something that 6 months ago I never would have considered, but it really has been magical, and it's easy. It's easy to do that, right? That I just go to a post of yours, and if somebody is posting good stuff, it's going to be evocative, where it's going to produce a response in you that you can then very easily put into the comments section in a way that, I mean, you're really good at coming back in the comment section, and that in and of itself can become its own little conversation in a way that, like you said, is almost impossible on Facebook or Twitter.
I think a lot of people, I've done this, I think intentionally and unintentionally, is that they're scared to reach out to me because I can get a little provocative. And my body, but as you found out, if you respond to me in the comment, I'm just having a good time. I'm having a laugh. I'm harmless. I really don't care what you choose to do. You're right. You have to kind of create a little polarity in your post to create that kind of magnet. And then the comments is when your true personality comes out, I find.
Absolutely. Well, and that polarity is about that corner, right? It's about having the point of view. And because that's what's interesting. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I do it when we coach people or when people ask me for help and I look at the content and I always ask them, so what hell are you standing on? Because the middle way doesn't allow for growth. It really hard for people to connect with you. But I really like this idea, and I like this idea. I think we should all be happy together. No. What is your idea that you want to stand behind? And let us know where you stand. Even if we disagree, at least we know in our heads, clear as day, this is the hell Tony's on, and this is my hell. We can say, we have the same hell. Yeah, let's connect, And I think when people try to be too nice, the opposite of nice, at least to me, isn't to be mean. The opposite of nice is to be yourself. Because I don't like nice people. Typically, nice people have a lot of insecurity. It's not really genuine. I love kind people. That's a choice they make. But nice people, people pleaser, and I really can't connect with them, even in real life. It's like, you just want me to like you. I'd rather you just say, I hate the St. Louis Cardinals. Great. Good. I'm a diehard Chicago Cubs fan. Don't say, I love St. Louis Cardinals and the Chicago Cubs. I think they're a wonderful team to me. Okay, I don't even know what you're talking about. Anyway, no, we're running over, but if you have 5 more minutes, let's shift it back into your life. If you had a Tony in front of you today, knowing what you know about your life, a 20-year-old Tony, what would you tell him to get to where he needs to be faster, or any advice you would give Tony to achieve his dreams?
Number one, first and foremost, do not under any circumstances go to law school. That's number one. Number
or
two,
business school. Don't get your MBA, people. Go ahead.
That's what I say is, if you can afford it, like if it's going to cost you very little in time and treasure, and you want to, go ahead. But don't mortgage your future for that degree. Second thing, you have to learn how to fail with grace. I was so terrified of failing, or more specifically, terrified of being found out as somebody who was not winning at everything, that it led me to go.
That's more common than you think.
Oh, it's totally common. Yeah, absolutely. And what has made a huge difference for me has been learning how to be okay with failure and embracing it as part of the process.
Why is failure part of the process? Little Tony's asking you. He's like, it doesn't make sense. I've been taught to work hard and achieve. Failure is constant.
Right. We were taught to avoid the red X at all costs. And I think that that's a tremendous mistake. And we could do another hour on the education system if you want to. I know you have a lot of strong opinions on that as well.
I used to be a teacher, so I would say wholeheartedly. No offense too much. I keep saying that on this call, but seriously, no offense to teachers. I know you went into it with a good heart, and you found out, it doesn't matter if you're here or somebody else. Just fill the script. Keep the factory line moving. Be quiet. If you do that, we'll give you tenure. You could stay here forever. If you're not going to do that, yeah, we're going to give you a pink slip, so to speak. So, I get it. So, yeah, the school system, what a concept. So, don't be afraid of failure, little Tony. In other words, lean into your fear, right?
The life that you want is on the other side of that.
Yeah.
And the only
That
way to
sounds
get,
so cliche. That's not
yeah,
but it's actually pretty true.
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
the only,
obviously, don't be ridiculous. Don't wrestle with the ball in Spain. It's I faced my fear. No, obviously, but more to the point. What is your heart calling you to do?
exactly,
I
yeah,
think a lot of people experience it. They hear the heart calling, and then they go to sleep, they're smiling, then they wake up like, I can't do that. I have to go to work. No, keep your heart singing a little bit longer and see where it takes you, even if it calls for hindering your destination at some point, at least plan for it, right? Or do
absolutely.
you recommend jumping in all the way?
I recommend starting with the smallest, easiest step you can take today in that direction, right? And then tomorrow, take another step. And that's why I focus on creativity and this idea of we need to be getting more creative. It's the idea of find something that you want to do and just you care about, and then figure out how to go from where you are today to the point where you have made that thing. And it can be a little thing. And if you take those steps day by day of putting in the work to get to the point where you've got that thing, you're going to fail in some way, you're going to learn things along the way, and then your capacity is going to have grown and your creative muscles will have strengthened, that then you could say, okay, I did that. Now I could see this bigger thing, this little bigger thing that I think I could take a crack at that. And before you know it, then maybe you end up on that cliff. And the Vonnegut line I'm always using is, we must continually be jumping off the cliffs and growing wings on the way down. And that's kind of how I live.
It's Vonnegut, one of your favorite writers.
He is. Yeah, I know we've gone back and
his
forth.
writing so sometimes I wonder if he was ever a copywriter because it's so short, concise,
He was.
detailed, with a little smirk at the end of the sentence. It's brilliant.
Yeah, he did a little writing at GE in Schenectady, New York, before going into fiction. Yeah.
Interesting. Huh? Well, that, my friend, is Tony. I will leave a link to his LinkedIn and his Rowdy Creative website in the description. Feel free to reach out to him. As you can tell, he's a great guy to chat with. So be on the lookout for the next show. With that, take it easy.